Eunicio did not hesitate. She walked into that hospital room like she owned every inch of it, her heels clicking against the tile floor with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of practice. From years of lying so well that even she had started to believe her own stories. She looked at the little girl lying in the bed, 6 years old, too small for the IV line taped to the inside of her arm, and she felt nothing. Not guilt, not shame, just calculation. She had arranged it herself. The blood draw, the dosage, the quiet transfer of a child's body from one room to another while the nurses looked the other way, because Eunicio had learned a long time ago that everyone in Seoul had a price, and the ones who worked near powerful men had prices that were easier to find than most. The little girl's name was Joy, and Yuna had used her like a spare part. If you have ever watched someone hurt a child and felt that specific kind of rage rise up in your chest, the kind that makes your hands shake and your throat go tight, then you already understand what this story is about. But ask yourself this: what would you do if the man who should have protected that child was the same man who let the monster in? What would you do if you were Amara? This story will take everything from you before it gives anything back. So if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and stay with us until the end. Because the truth in this one does not arrive gently. Drop your city in the comments below. Let us see how far this story travels. And if something in it moves you, leave a like. It means more than you know. Now, let us go back to where it started. Well, the first time Amara Bennett saw Kang Min-jae, he was bleeding on the floor of a back hallway in the Sungsim Medical Clinic, and nobody was helping him. That detail mattered, not because it was dramatic, though it was, but because it told her something about the kind of man he was before she knew anything else about him. The security guard had stepped back. The receptionist had turned her face toward the wall. Even the junior doctor on shift that night had found a reason to be somewhere else. Whatever Min-jae was, whatever world he moved through, the people around him had already decided that getting close was a risk they were not willing to take. Amara was 26 years old. She had been in Seoul for 8 months, working as a medical assistant on a temporary visa, sending half her salary back to her mother in Atlanta, eating cup noodles 4 nights a week, and telling herself it was an adventure. She did not know what the Baekryong syndicate was. She did not know that the man on the floor had once broken 3 fingers of a rival gang lieutenant without changing his expression. She just saw a person who was hurt and a room full of people pretending they did not see it. She knelt down next to him. "Hey." She pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck. His pulse was there, but it was thin, working too hard for what it was producing. "Can you hear me? I need you to stay with me." He opened his eyes. They were dark and unfocused, moving across her face like he was trying to place her in a world that had suddenly stopped making sense. "You're not going to pass out," she told him. "Not yet. Not until I know what I'm dealing with." He said something in Korean that she did not catch. Then, after a pause, in English that was careful and precise, "You should step back." "That's not happening." She was already checking his pupils, one hand pressing lightly against his ribs where the shirt was wet. "What's your name?" He did not answer for a moment. Then, "Min-jae." "Okay, Min-jae. My name is Amara. I need you to hold still while I figure out how bad this is." Later, she would think about that night a lot. Not with sentimentality, not with the soft glow of memory that people put over the beginnings of love. She would think about it with the sharp, clear focus of someone trying to understand exactly where the story changed, where the decision was made that everything else would follow from. She had stayed. That was the decision. She had stayed when everyone else left, and Min-jae had noticed, and something in him had filed that away in a place that was not easy to reach, not easy to name. It took 2 hours to stabilize him that night. A blood condition the clinic had already flagged, something rare and expensive to treat, something that required a specific type of transfusion that Min-jae kept refusing because he did not want anyone knowing the specifics of what was wrong with him. Amara had argued with him until he agreed to a partial treatment, and then she had stayed past the end of her shift to make sure his numbers were moving in the right direction. When she finally stood up to leave, he watched her from the bed. "Why?" he asked. She picked up her bag. "Why what? Why stay? The others, I know what the others did." She pulled her jacket on. "I'm not them." He did not say anything after that, but the way he looked at her, not with gratitude exactly, because men like Min-jae were not wired for gratitude, not in any straightforward way, but with something that she would only understand later, something that looked a lot like the first crack in a wall that had been built over a very long time. The thing about Yoona Seo was that she had been watching Min-jae for years before Amara ever arrived. She had grown up adjacent to the Baek Kryong world, her father a mid-level associate, her mother a woman who understood that power in Seoul's underground ran through families, through bloodlines, through marriages that meant something beyond affection. Yoona had been groomed, not in any dramatic way, but in the slow, patient way of someone who is raised to understand that their value is tied to the right alliance, and that securing that alliance requires a particular kind of focus. She had decided Min-jae was her future when she was 19 years old. She had spent 7 years building toward it. So when she walked into the clinic 2 weeks after Amara first knelt down next to him and saw the way his eyes tracked that young woman across the room, the way his attention moved differently, more carefully, the way he actually answered when she spoke to him, Yoona did not panic. She assessed. She was very good at assessing. "Who is she?" Yoona asked one of Min-jae's men, a heavy-set lieutenant named Park, who had known her long enough to answer without thinking. "Medical assistant, American. She's been helping with his treatment." "Is she effective?" Park looked at her strangely. "She seems to be." "Good." Yoona smiled, and it was the kind of smile that did not reach anything behind her eyes. "Let's make sure she stays comfortable, then. For now." For now. That was the part she kept private. The months that followed were not a love story in any clean sense. Amara was not the kind of woman who fell easily. She had learned early, through a father who left and a mother who worked herself thin covering for him, that love was not an emotion to trust on its own. It needed to be earned and then re-earned and then tested again. Min-jae was not an easy person to know. He was controlled in ways that sometimes felt like walls and sometimes felt like discipline, and Amara could not always tell the difference. He did not talk about his work with her, and she did not ask, because she had already figured out enough to understand that there were things she was better off not knowing. What she knew was this: he listened when she spoke, which was rarer than people gave it credit for. He remembered small things, the way she took her coffee, a comment she had made weeks earlier about a particular Korean writer she had been trying to read. He showed up at the clinic on days she had not told him she would be there, and he always had a reason that sounded like coincidence, and they both understood it was not. She fell for him slowly and then completely, the way that things built on careful attention tend to go. She also knew that Yoona existed. Min-jae did not hide her, not exactly, but he minimized. Yoona was described as an old family connection, a presence from a world that Min-jae was careful not to bring into whatever was forming between him and Amara. Amara accepted this with the kind of wary pragmatism that comes from loving someone you do not fully understand yet. She watched, she waited, she was careful, but she was not careful enough. She found out she was pregnant on a Tuesday morning in March, crouched on the bathroom floor of the small apartment near Mapo she had been renting for just under a year. The test was from the pharmacy 2 blocks away, bought between shifts, and she had not let herself think about what she hoped the result would be because she did not trust herself to be objective about it. The result was clear. Amara sat on that floor for a long time. She did not feel joy, exactly. She felt something larger and more complicated than joy. A kind of terrified recognition, like the moment before something irreversible. She thought about her mother, who had raised her alone and never let her see the weight of it, until Amara was old enough to finally understand. She thought about Min-jae and the world he moved through, and the things she did not ask about that she sometimes heard anyway, in fragments, in the expressions of people around him. She thought about Yoona. She got up off the floor. She washed her face. She went to work. That evening, she told Min-jae. They were in his apartment, the one in Yongsan that looked like it had been designed to impress and had achieved that without managing to feel like anyone actually lived in it. He had cooked, which he did sometimes, and which always surprised her slightly because it was such a specific kind of domestic normalcy for a man whose professional life was so far from that. She told him while he had his back to her, setting dishes on the table. There was a pause. He turned around slowly, and she could not read his face, and her heart was doing something stupid and panicked in her chest that she refused to let show on her expression. "Say that again," he said. "I'm pregnant." He set down what he was holding. He looked at her for a long moment, and she watched something move through him that was real and unguarded in a way she did not often see from him. It was not quite joy either. It was that same terrified recognition she had felt on the bathroom floor. It was a man standing at the edge of something enormous, trying to decide whether he had the nerve to step toward it. "Okay," he said finally. She blinked. "Okay. We will figure it out." He said it like it was obvious, like the question of whether was already settled and they were moving straight to how. She exhaled. Something in her chest released that she had not realized she was holding. She did not know that Yuna Seo had a key to a side entrance of this building. She did not know that Yuna had been there for 20 minutes, sitting in a car in the parking structure below, watching Amara's reflection in the lobby window as she came in. She did not know that Yuna had already been on the phone with two people, a lawyer and a man she referred to only by the name of a neighborhood, and that those calls had both been about the same thing, about Amara, about the pregnancy, about what to do about both. Yuna came to Amara 3 days later. She came to the clinic during a shift, which was deliberate. Amara would not be able to react the way she might in private. She would have to maintain composure. She would have to be professional. Yuna understood leverage in all its forms, and location was one of them. She was dressed beautifully, as always. She smiled the way she always smiled. "Can we speak? Privately. It won't take long." Amara looked at her for a moment. Then she led her to a supply room at the end of the hall. Yuna closed the door. What she said, in the space of the next 11 minutes, was both simple and devastating. She told Amara that Min-jae was more ill than Amara knew, that the blood condition was progressing in ways his doctors were not sharing with her, that the stress of a child, of an illegitimate complication, of a foreign woman with no ties to his world entering his family line, would accelerate what was already happening to him. She said this with the calm, measured voice of someone delivering facts rather than threats. Then she said that Min-jae's family, the men above him, the ones who controlled the Baekryong hierarchy, had already been informed of the pregnancy, and that they had already made their position clear. A child with an outsider, unplanned, unvetted, would be seen as weakness. And in their world, weakness had consequences that Amara could not protect anyone from. "I'm not asking you to disappear," Yuna said. "I'm asking you to be practical. You care about him. I can see that. If you care about him, you understand what this situation costs him." Amara stood very still. "You're lying," she said. Yuna opened her bag and set a folder on the supply shelf between them. Medical documents, not real ones. Amara would not know that for years. But they looked real, and they said what Yuna needed them to say. "I have no reason to lie to you," Yuna said. But she did. She had every reason in the world. Amara looked at the documents. She looked at Yuna's face. She thought about the man she had watched bleeding on a clinic floor. The man who had said to her, "You should step back," and had then let her stay. Had led her past every wall he had looked at her 3 nights ago across a dinner table and said, "We will figure it out," like it was simple. She thought about what it would cost him if it was not simple. She was not perfect. She was 26 and exhausted and frightened and in love with someone she did not fully understand, and she made the decision that people make when they love someone more than they trust themselves. She picked up the folder. She said nothing. She left the supply room. She did not go to Min-jae. She spent 2 days trying to decide whether she was making the right choice or the worst mistake of her life, and at the end of those 2 days she still did not know, but she had already started making arrangements. A friend in Busan. A way out that did not require anyone's permission. She wrote Min-jae a letter. She told him she was leaving. She told him she had thought about it, and she could not do this. His world, his life, the parts of it that she had been asking herself to ignore. She said she was sorry. She did not mention the pregnancy. She did not mention Yuna. She told herself this was protection. She told herself she was doing what she had to do. She hated herself for it, but she did it anyway. Min-jae received the letter on a morning when he had been planning to call her. He read it twice. He set it down. He did not call. He did not go to the clinic. He sat in his apartment for a long time in the specific silence of someone who has just been told that the thing they were starting to build was not going to exist. He did not know about Joy. He did not know about the blood donations, that over the next year, as his illness progressed and required increasingly expensive treatment, someone had been making anonymous contributions to cover the cost. He did not know that Amara, from Busan, then from a small apartment in Incheon, Then later from a suburb of Seoul she had returned to because she ran out of options, had been giving blood and working 2 jobs and paying for the treatments of a man who thought she had abandoned him for money. He found out something else instead. He found out 6 months after she left that Yuna was pregnant, or so she said. Min-jae did not believe Yuna right away. That was the part nobody talked about later. Not his men, not the lawyers, not even Yuna herself, who preferred a version of the story where he had accepted her news with immediate warmth and the quiet satisfaction of a man whose life was falling into order. The truth was messier. The truth was that he sat across from her in the Yongsan apartment, in the same room where Amara had told him something similar not 6 months earlier, and his first instinct was not happiness. It was suspicion. "How far along?" he asked. 8 weeks? She did not flinch. "I wanted to be certain before I told you." He looked at her for a long moment. Yuna was dressed carefully, as she always was, and her expression held just enough vulnerability to seem genuine without crossing into performance. She had practiced this. He did not know that, but some part of him registered it the way you register a wrong note in a familiar song. Not enough to name, just enough to make you still. "We were not—" He stopped. "We were," she said quietly. "Once. Do you remember? After the Inchin meeting. You were not in a good place that night." He remembered the night. He did not remember the specifics clearly, which had been part of her calculation. She had made sure of that. He stood up and walked to the window. Below, Seoul moved with its usual indifference. Traffic, light, the anonymous churn of a city that did not care about the private disasters of the people living inside it. "I need a test," he said. "Of course." She said it easily, like she had expected this, like she had already arranged it. "I have an appointment on Thursday. You're welcome to come." He turned back to look at her. She was watching him with that expression she wore, composed, patient, the face of a woman who had learned that the best way to handle Kang Min-jae was to appear unshakable. It worked on most people. On Min-jae, it produced a faint, persistent unease that he could never quite locate the source of. "Thursday," he said. "Thursday," she confirmed. She left 20 minutes later and he stood in the apartment alone for a long time, looking at nothing in particular, turning something over in his mind that he could not quite bring himself to look at directly. Amara's letter was still in the drawer of his desk, folded in thirds, creased at the corners from the number of times he had opened it, and then put it back without reading it again. He had not thrown it away. He had not been able to explain to himself why. The Thursday appointment was at a private clinic in Gangnam, the kind of place designed to be discreet, to handle the complications of powerful people without producing paperwork that traveled in the wrong directions. Min-jae had his own doctor there, a man named Shin who had been managing his blood condition for 3 years, and who understood that his relationship with Min-jae required a particular kind of loyalty. Yuna sat beside him in the consultation room, hands folded in her lap, serene in the particular way of someone who has already won and is simply waiting for the paperwork to confirm it. The test was not the test Min-jae thought it was. He would not know this for years. What he saw was documentation, a clean result, a number that meant what she told him it meant. What she had actually done, through a contact at the clinic, through a favor owed and collected with surgical precision, was ensure that the result said what she needed it to say before he ever sat down in that room. Dr. Shin handed over the folder. Min-jae read it. He looked up at Yuna. She looked back at him with an expression that was perfectly calibrated, not triumphant, because triumph would have been a mistake, but softly expectant, the face of a woman waiting to be acknowledged. "All right," Min-jae said. The word came out flat, stripped of everything. "I know this is complicated," Yuna said. "It's not complicated." He closed the folder. "It is what it is." He did not reach for her hand. He did not make any gesture that could be read as warmth, but he did not leave the room before she did, which was the closest he came that day to anything that could be called acceptance. Yuna noted that she noted everything. The pregnancy Yuna was carrying was not Min-jae's. She had been involved with a man named Choi Dae-won for almost a year, a real estate developer with syndicate connections, careful enough to keep the relationship quiet, useful enough to Yuna for reasons that went beyond affection. She had ended that involvement the moment she understood the situation with Min-jae was shifting in a direction she could use. She had done the calculation, as she always did, and the calculation said that a child, the right child, presented at the right moment, was the fastest way to make her position permanent. The baby she was carrying was Choi's. The paperwork said it was Min-jae's. And Lily Seo, the child born 7 months later, small and dark-haired and completely innocent of all the machinery that had produced her existence, would grow up in Min-jae's household as his daughter, because Yuna had built the lie too carefully and too completely for any single thread to be pulled. Min-jae did not love Yuna. He was not capable, in that period, of the kind of attention love requires. He was too deep inside his own damage, the residue of Amara's departure still sitting in him like something he had never properly processed. But he was responsible in the cold, methodical way of a man who does not know how to be anything else. He provided for the child. He ensured she had everything. He spent time with Lily in the distant, careful way of someone who is trying very hard to do the right thing and has not yet figured out what the right thing actually feels like. Lily grew and Lily thrived, and Lily called him father in a voice that was completely sincere. And Min-jae, who had never expected to be anyone's father, who had certainly not planned any of this, found that the word landed somewhere in him that he had not known was available. He still did not love Yuna, but he told himself that was not the point. 3 years passed. Amara spent them in ways she did not talk about later, because the talking would have required acknowledging how close to the edge she had gotten. She was in Incheon for the first year, then moved to a smaller city to the south where nobody knew her name or the name of the man she had left. Joy was born in November, 6 weeks early, small enough to make the nurses tense and stubborn enough to surprise them, which was the first thing Amara recognized about her daughter. That stubbornness, that refusal to comply with the expectations of whatever room she was in. Joy had Min-jae's eyes. Amara noticed it the first time she really looked at her daughter. That specific darkness, that directness, the way they focused on a thing with total attention. She noticed it, and then she stopped letting herself notice it, because noticing it was not something she had the bandwidth for. She had a baby who was premature and a body that was already starting to show the cost of the blood donations, and the double shifts and the years of not quite enough of everything. She was not managing well. She was managing. There was a difference, and it was significant, and she understood it in the specific way of someone who has made the distinction the line between surviving and not. Joy was 2 when Amara started feeling the exhaustion in a way that was different from regular exhaustion. Not the tired of not enough sleep or the tired of working too hard. Something deeper, something that felt cellular, like something at the base of her had started running inefficiently. She ignored it for as long as she could, which was her nature, and then she went to a doctor, which was not her nature but became necessary, and the doctor ran panels and referred her to a specialist, and the specialist sat across from her with the careful face of someone about to say something they had said before but that never became routine. The condition had a name. It was chronic and progressive and manageable if caught early enough, which hers had not quite been. The treatment was expensive, not in the range of impossible, but in the range of currently impossible given her circumstances. Without it, the prognosis was a slope. Not a cliff, not immediately, but a slope. And slopes only go one direction. She sat in the specialist's office with Joy on her lap. She had not had anyone to leave her with. And Joy was playing with the zipper of Amara's jacket, completely absorbed in the small mechanical miracle of it. And Amara looked at her daughter's focused face and did the calculation that she had been avoiding for 3 years. She could not do this alone. She could not leave Joy alone. Those 2 facts pressed against each other like tectonic plates, and the friction between them produced only one possible result. It took her 6 weeks to make the decision. She found Min-jae's current address through a contact she would not name later, a woman who had worked in his organization's outer orbit and who owed Amara a specific private debt from the clinic years. The address was in a residential compound in northern Seoul, heavily secured, the kind of property that said power without announcing it. She did not go herself. She could not. She was not strong enough yet for whatever that encounter would produce, and she knew it, and she was trying for once to be honest with herself about her own limitations. Instead, she prepared Joy. She did it over 2 evenings, sitting with her daughter on the floor of their apartment, speaking in the careful, level voice she used when she needed Joy to actually hear her, rather than just listen. "I need to tell you about your father," she said. Joy looked up from the drawing she was making. She was 6, with the specific gravity of children who have spent most of their lives in the company of adults. "Is he real?" Yes? Where is he? He's in Seoul. She paused. He's someone important, and he doesn't know you exist. I need you to go meet him. Joy processed this with the thoroughness of someone taking in a large amount of information. Why can't you come? I will come. But I need you to go first. Amara reached into the small box she had carried from Incheon and from Busan before that, and from the apartment in Mapo before that, the box that held the things she could not leave behind. She took out the necklace. It was simple, a thin gold chain with a pendant that had belonged to her grandmother, a small thing that had survived more moves and more losses than it had any right to. Take this with you. When you show him, tell him your mother wanted him to see it. Joy held the necklace in both hands, with the seriousness of a child who understands that a thing is precious even when she cannot articulate why. What if he doesn't like me? Joy asked. Amara looked at her daughter's face, those eyes, that directness, and something in her chest did a thing she could not afford to do right now, so she stopped it. He's going to, she said. He might not know it right away, but he is. She believed that. She had to believe it. Because the alternative was that she had made the worst possible decision twice. Once when she left, and once when she sent her child into the house of a man who had every reason to be angry at the woman who raised her. Joy arrived at the compound on a Wednesday morning in October, brought by the contact, a quiet woman named Ms. Han who had agreed to drive her and to wait, and admitted through the outer gate by a guard who was so confused by the situation that he let her in mostly out of an inability to categorize her as a threat. She was 6 years old, wearing a yellow jacket, carrying a small backpack with a drawing of a rabbit on it, and she walked across the courtyard of Kang Min-jae's compound with the focused composure of someone who had been told what to do and intended to do it. One of Min-jae's senior men, a lieutenant named Ryu, who had worked with him for 9 years, was the first to actually intercept her. Who let you in? He demanded, looking past her for an adult. Ms. Han, Joy said. She's outside. Who are you? My name is Joy Bennett. She said it clearly. I need to see Kang Min-jae. My mother sent me. Ryu stared at her. He had handled a great many situations in 9 years of working for Min-jae, and none of them had looked like this. Your mother, he repeated. Amara Bennett. She said he would know. The name landed on Ryu's face like a stone dropped into still water. He had been there, on the periphery, during that period, young enough not to know the full story, old enough to remember the woman's name, and the specific quality of silence that had settled over Min-jae's household in the weeks after she left. He took out his phone. Min-jae was in a meeting with 2 men from the Busan chapter of the syndicate when Ryu's call came through. He declined it. Ryu called again immediately. Min-jae looked at the number, excused himself, and stepped into the hallway. This better be. There is a child here, Ryu said. 6 years old. She says her mother sent her. She says her mother's name is Amara Bennett. The hallway went very quiet. Min-jae stood in it for a moment that felt longer than it was. Say that again, he said. Ryu said it again. Min-jae told the Busan men the meeting was postponed and walked downstairs with the specific controlled pace of a man holding something in very tightly. He found Joy in the entrance hall, sitting on a bench with her backpack on her knees, looking at the space around her with the calm curiosity of a child who has learned to make herself comfortable in uncomfortable situations. She looked up when he came in. They looked at each other. Min-jae stopped walking. He could not have explained what happened in that moment, not to Ryu, not to anyone, because it was not a rational response to anything. It was something below rational, something that hit before his mind could organize it into language. The eyes. The quality of attention in them. Something in the line of the jaw. In the stillness. In the way she did not look away from him, even though he was a stranger in a house she had never been to. Even though he was a large man with a reputation that children usually sensed without knowing the specifics of. She did not look away. You're my father, she said. It was not a question. Min-jae's jaw tightened. He looked at Ryu. Ryu looked back with an expression that offered absolutely nothing useful. Who brought you here? Min-jae asked. Ms. Han. She's waiting outside. Joy opened the front pocket of her backpack and took out the necklace. She held it toward him with both hands, the way Amara had taught her. My mother wanted you to see this. She said you would know. He did know. He recognized it immediately. The pendant, the specific weight and style of it, a piece he had held once in the apartment in Yongsan when it had fallen from Amara's neck during an ordinary evening that had not felt ordinary at the time, when she had laughed at herself for being clumsy, and he had stood behind her to refasten the clasp. He had held it in his hands for 30 seconds. He had never forgotten it. He stood very still. "Where is your mother?" he asked. The voice came out level. He had a lot of practice with level. "She's sick," Joy said. "She couldn't come. She said to tell you." She paused, the way a child pauses when reciting something they have memorized and want to get exactly right. She said, "Your father may not remember us, but he deserves to know you exist." The entrance hall was very quiet. Ryu had stopped breathing in any audible way. Min-jae looked at the child. He looked at the necklace. He looked at the child again, and that thing he could not name, that pull, that recognition that bypassed everything rational and landed somewhere he could not defend, was there again, louder this time. He took a breath. He stepped back. "Take her to the sitting room," he said to Ryu. "Get her something to eat." He turned and walked toward his office, and his voice when he spoke next was quiet and very controlled. "And find out where Yuna is." Yuna was at a luncheon in Apgujeong when her phone buzzed. She looked at the message from her contact inside the compound. 2 sentences, clean and factual, and the lunch conversation continued around her, and she smiled at whatever was being said and picked up her water glass and set it down again without drinking from it. A child. Amara's child. At the compound. She had known, in the abstract, that Amara had given birth. She had paid for that information 2 years after Amara's departure, not because she felt threatened. She did not allow herself to feel threatened. It was an indulgence she could not afford, but because knowing was always better than not knowing. She had filed it away. A child in Incheon. A girl. Not her problem yet. She excused herself from the table and walked to the bathroom and stood at the sink for a moment with the water running, looking at her own face. She thought about what Min-jae would be doing right now. The necklace. She had not anticipated the necklace specifically, which irritated her because she prided herself on anticipating. She thought about the eyes on that child. She had seen a photograph once. She did not let herself think about the eyes too long. She dried her hands. She picked up her phone and called a man who worked for her. Not for Min-jae, not for the syndicate, for her personally, on a payroll that did not appear in any accounting she shared with anyone. "I need you to find out everything about the child's medical history," she said when he answered. "Blood type especially, and I need it by tonight." "The girl in Incheon." "She's not in Incheon anymore. Move quickly." She hung up. She straightened her jacket. She walked back to the luncheon and resumed the conversation and ate the rest of her meal without visible disturbance. She was already working. Min-jae spent the afternoon in a state he would not have been able to accurately label. He sat across from Joy in the sitting room for 40 minutes, and it was one of the stranger experiences of his adult life. He had questioned informants. He had negotiated with men who would have preferred him dead. He had sat across from his own father at the age of 22 and accepted a position he did not want and a life he had not chosen. None of that had been like this. Joy ate the food that was brought, rice and soup and a piece of fruit she ate around the edges first, which he noticed and did not comment on. And she answered his questions with the directness of a child who had not yet been taught to perform. "How old are you?" 6. My birthday is in November. "What month is it now?" "October." He did the math without meaning to. He had already done it. "Does your mother talk about me?" Joy considered this with real seriousness. "She says you're someone she knew a long time ago. She doesn't say bad things." A pause. "She doesn't say much, but she keeps your picture." He went still. "What picture?" "The one from the clinic, when she was working there. She and a man." Joy looked at him with those eyes. "I think the man is you. You look the same." He did not respond to that. He thought about the picture she was describing. There had been a staff event once, something formal. Someone had taken photographs. He had not known Amara kept one. He had not known she kept anything. He sat with that for a moment in a way that was not comfortable. "Why did she send you?" he asked. Joy's expression shifted slightly. Something that was not quite sadness, but was adjacent to it. "She said she's sick. She said she didn't want me to be alone if something happened." The words hit with a quietness that was worse than if they had been loud. He looked at this child, her mother's composure, his own eyes, and felt something shift in the structure of what he believed about the past 6 years. Not overturn it, not yet. He was not ready for that. He was Kang Min-jae, and he had built his entire architecture on the ability to resist the thing that wanted to get in until he had examined it from every angle. But the shift was there, real and undeniable. He was still sitting with it when Yuna arrived. She came through the front entrance with the confidence of a woman who lived there, which she did not, technically, but had made herself comfortable treating as though she did. She had Lily with her, 5 years old, dark-haired, brought along with a precision that was not accidental. Yuna understood the value of optics. She walked into the sitting room and looked at Joy. Joy looked back at her. There was a moment between them, 2 children, one who understood nothing of the politics she had walked into, and one who was a prop in a war she had not been told was happening. And it was Min-jae who broke it. Yuna. Min-jae. She shifted her gaze to him with practiced ease. I came as soon as I heard. I thought you might need... I don't need anything right now. The sentence landed clearly. She processed it without showing what she did with it. Of course. She reached for Lily's hand. Lily, why don't you say hello? Lily looked at Joy with the open curiosity of a child who has not yet learned that people can be used against each other. Hi. Hi, said Joy. Yuna watched Min-jae watching the 2 children. She watched his face. She was very good at reading him, and what she read right now produced something cold and practical in her. Not fear. She refused fear, but its functional equivalent, the thing that made her sharpen. We should talk, she said to Min-jae. When you have a moment. I'll find you, he said, which meant nothing. She left the room with Lily and went down the hall and stood in the kitchen with a glass of water she did not drink, and she thought about blood types, and she thought about timing, and she thought about what a DNA test would show, and how much time she had before someone suggested one. She thought about Lily, who needed a specific kind of transfusion. The doctors had flagged it 3 months ago, a procedure she had been putting off scheduling because she had been managing too many other things. A procedure that required a match that Lily's own blood work made difficult to find within the standard donor pool. And then the thought arrived, the one that she would not say out loud, the one that lived in the coldest part of what she was willing to do. She thought about Joy's blood type, which her contact had confirmed an hour ago. The match was exact. She set the water glass down on the counter with a small, precise click. She reached for her phone. She told herself what she was about to arrange was necessary. She told herself it was not so different from the other things she had arranged, the forged documents, the paid-off nurses, the manufactured test results that had made a lie into a legal truth. She told herself that one more step, taken cleanly and without hesitation, was just another version of the same calculation. She told herself this while she dialed. She did not let herself think about Joy's face, about the yellow jacket, about the way the child had held out the necklace with both hands, like it was something that mattered, because thinking about that was not something she could afford right now. The phone rang twice. Her contact answered. I need to schedule a procedure, Yuna said, for 2 children. 1 donor, 1 recipient. The donor is not to be told what she's donating for. I need it done before the end of the week. There was a pause on the other end. The donor, the contact said carefully. She's how old? Yuna did not blink. Old enough, she said. And in the sitting room at the other end of the compound, Joy finished the last of her fruit and looked out the window at the courtyard, and Min-jae sat across from her and looked at his daughter's face and felt, in the wordless region below everything he thought he knew about himself, that something had already begun that he was not going to be able to stop. The procedure was scheduled for Thursday. Yuna had done it quietly, the way she did everything that mattered, through a private clinic in Mappo that owed her a specific kind of silence, through a contact who understood that questions were a luxury he could not afford when dealing with her. She had presented it to Min-jae as a routine checkup for both children, framed in the careful language of someone who had already thought through every possible objection and neutralized them in advance. Lily needed monitoring. Joy, as a guest in the household, should also be looked at. It was only responsible. It would take 2 hours at most. Min-jae had been distracted. That was the truth of it, and Yuna had known it and used it. He had been moving through the days since Joy's arrival in a state that looked like his normal controlled efficiency, but was actually something with a crack running through the center of it. Functional on the surface, compromised underneath. He had agreed to the appointment without asking the specific questions he should have asked. Amara did not know about Thursday until Wednesday night. What? She found out through Ms. Han, who found out through a woman at the clinic who had worked alongside Amara years ago at Sungsim, and who still, after everything, felt she owed Amara something she had never properly paid. The call came at 11:40 at night, and Amara was already in bed because she had learned to go to bed early when the exhaustion was this particular quality, the kind that settled in the bones rather than the muscles, the kind that sleep helped but did not fix. She picked up the phone. She listened. She was out of bed before the woman finished the second sentence. The drive to Seoul took 2 hours in a car that belonged to a neighbor Amara had woken without apology. She sat in the passenger seat and did not speak and did not look at her phone and did not let herself do the thing her mind kept trying to do, which was calculate the worst version of what she was driving toward. She pressed her palms flat against her thighs and breathed and watched the highway lights go past in the dark. She thought about Joy's face when she had left her with Ms. Han 4 days ago. The way Joy had not cried because Joy did not cry easily, which was something Amara felt both proud of and guilty about in ways she could not cleanly separate. The way she had held the necklace, both hands, careful. She thought about what Yuna was. She had known, for years, in the quiet and unverifiable way of someone who cannot prove a thing but understands it completely, what Yuna had done. She had known that the documents were false. She had known that the story she had been told in that supply room was a construction, precise and intentional, built to produce a specific outcome. She had known all of this, and had been unable to do anything with it, because knowing without proof is just a kind of torture, and she had enough of that already without adding more. But this, using Joy's body without her knowledge, without consent, without telling a 6-year-old child what was being taken from her. This was the place where Yuna had miscalculated, because this was the place where Amara stopped being afraid. She arrived at the Mapo clinic at 6 in the morning, 2 hours before the appointment was scheduled. The building was a converted commercial space, 4 floors, the kind of discreet private facility that did not put its name in large letters outside because its clients preferred it that way. She walked in through the front entrance with the specific quality of calm that comes not from peace, but from having made a decision so completely that there is nothing left to deliberate. The receptionist looked up. "Ma'am, we're not open for—" "I'm here for my daughter," Amara said. "Joy Bennett. She has an appointment this morning. I need to speak with whoever scheduled it." The receptionist's expression did a complicated thing. "1 moment," she said. The moment stretched to 4 minutes. Then a doctor came out. Not the one Yuna had arranged, a different one, younger, with the uncomfortable face of someone who has just been made aware that a situation is not what it was presented to him as being. He introduced himself as Dr. Kwan. "Ms. Bennett." He held the door open to a consultation room. "Please come in." She went in. She sat down. She did not take off her coat. "Tell me what was scheduled for my daughter," she said. Dr. Kwan sat across from her and pressed his palms together in a gesture that was either prayer or a man holding himself together. "A blood draw," he said. "Standard panel, we were told. Pediatric." Was it a standard panel? The pause was short but real. "No," he said. "What was it?" He set a folder on the table between them and opened it. He was, she realized, a man who was not going to survive whatever was about to happen to this clinic without first trying to distance himself from it. I was making a calculation in real time, and the calculation was coming down on the side of telling the truth. The order was for a directed donation, he said, blood and a bone marrow preliminary draw, for a specific recipient. He slid the paper toward her. A child named Lily Seo. Amara looked at the paper. She looked at it for a long time. "How much would that take from a 6-year-old?" she said. It was not a question, not really, but he answered it anyway. "The bone marrow component," he stopped. "It's not dangerous, in isolation, for a healthy child, but the informed consent process requires parental—" Was I contacted? No. Was I listed as the child's guardian on any of these forms? He looked at the folder. "A different name is listed." "What name?" He turned the form around so she could see it. Yuna Seo. Amara sat with that for a moment. The specific quality of rage she felt was very cold and very clear, which was different from the hot, unfocused kind, and more dangerous. She had felt the hot kind before. This was new. "Cancel the appointment," she said. "It's already—" He cleared his throat. "Yes, of course." She stood up. "I need copies of everything in that folder. Every form, every order, every name. I need them now." He nodded. He was already reaching for the printer. "What?" She called Min-jae from the parking lot. She had not called him in 6 years. She had his number through the same contact who had given her his address. And she had put it in her phone and looked at it many times and never pressed the button, because calling required a readiness she had not been able to locate until now. She pressed the button. It rang 3 times. He answered. The silence on the line was less than a second, but it had weight. "Amara." His voice was exactly as she remembered it, which she had not expected, and it hit her somewhere she had not armored. "Where is Joy?" she said. "She's here. At the compound. She's—" "Pull her out of that appointment, whatever Yuna scheduled for this morning. Cancel it, right now." A pause. "I'm not certain what you—" "Min-jae." She said his name the way she used to, direct and without decoration, the way that had always gotten through whatever he was performing at the time. "Listen to me. Yuna scheduled a blood draw and a bone marrow procedure for Joy this morning without my consent. She listed herself as Joy's guardian. The clinic has the paperwork. I'm standing outside it right now." She waited. "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" The silence this time was longer. "Say that again," he said. The voice had changed, stripped down to something colder. She said it again. She heard him move, the specific sound of a man standing up from where he was sitting, a chair, quick. She heard him speak to someone in Korean, rapid and low, and she caught Ryu's name and the word appointment and cancel, and now. "Are you coming here?" he said. "Yes." "How long?" 2 hours. "I'll be here." A beat. "Amara." He stopped. "Don't." She knew what he was going to say, or something in the vicinity of it, and she did not have the reserves for it right now. "Just make sure she's okay. I'll be there in 2 hours." She hung up. She sat in the borrowed ER in this parking lot of the Mapo clinic and pressed the copies of the forms against her chest and breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, the way the doctor had taught her, the technique for when things started to go sideways in ways her body registered before her mind caught up. She thought about Joy. She got in the car. Min-jae found Yuna in the east wing of the compound, in the room she had made into a kind of informal office over the years, the room that had always irritated him slightly because it implied a permanence he had never explicitly offered. She was on her phone when he came in, and she ended the call when she saw his face, which was the right instinct, because his face was doing something she had not seen in a long time. He set the paper on the desk in front of her. It was a message from Ryu, forwarded from the clinic, a confirmation of the cancellation with the original order attached. He had gotten it 11 minutes after Amara's call. Yuna looked at the paper. She looked at it with the expression of someone rapidly reorganizing, which was fast and nearly invisible, but not fast enough. "Explain this to me," Min-jae said. "Min-jae, don't start with my name. Explain the document." She was quiet for a moment. Then she took her breath and she did what she was best at. She pivoted. "Lily needs a compatible donor. The doctors flagged it months ago. I was trying to solve the problem quietly, without worrying you, because you've had enough. You listed yourself as Joy's guardian. I had to, for the paperwork. Joy is 6 years old." His voice was flat and very even, which was worse than if it had been loud. "Her mother is alive. You do not have the legal right to authorize a medical procedure for someone else's child. You know this." Yuna's jaw tightened fractionally. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "After. When it was done and Lily was stable and there was nothing left to worry about. After." He repeated the word with a quality that stopped her. "You were going to take something from a child without telling her mother, without telling me, and tell me about it after." She looked at him. She was recalibrating. He could see it, sorting through the available responses and discarding the ones that would not land. She chose the one she had used before, the one that had worked before. She made herself smaller, softer. She let something into her eyes that looked like distress. "I panicked," she said. "Lily is my daughter. I was scared. I made a bad decision. She reached across the desk. Min-jae, I know how this looks, but I was terrified for her. I didn't think… No. He stepped back before her hand reached him. You thought very clearly. That's the problem. He picked up the paper. He left the room. Dump. Yuna sat alone for 40 seconds after the door closed. Then she picked up her phone and made 3 calls in rapid succession. To her lawyer, to the contact at the clinic, and to the man she still thought of as her insurance, the one who held the manufactured DNA results and the forged medical records from 6 years ago and the evidence of payments made to hospital staff. She had built a system. Systems had redundancies. She told herself this in the precise internal voice she used when the thing she was managing started to feel like it was getting away from her. She told herself she still had time. Amara arrived at the compound at just after 9 in the morning. She had not been here before. She had sent Joy through Ms. Han. She had not let herself come. And the scale of it registered in her peripheral vision, the high walls and the layered security, and the compound logic of a world built to keep certain things out and certain things in. She thought briefly about what it meant that her daughter had been living inside this for 4 days, and then she stopped thinking about it because it was not useful. The gate opened before she reached it. Ryu was waiting on the other side, and he nodded at her with the brief, neutral nod of a man who had absorbed a great deal of information in the last hour and had not yet decided what to do with all of it. He led her inside without speaking. Joy was in the sitting room. She was in the same spot Amara had been told she'd been for most of her time here, by the window, with a drawing in front of her. She looked up when Amara came in, and the expression that crossed her face was not the dramatic relief of a child who has been frightened. It was something simpler and more exhausting, the expression of someone who had been holding themselves together and was now allowed to stop. She slid off the chair and crossed the room and pressed her face against Amara's stomach without a word. Amara held the back of her daughter's head with one hand and looked at the wall above her and did the breathing again. You okay? She asked. Joy nodded against her. They didn't take you to any appointments? Joy shook her head. Good. Amara exhaled. Good. She heard footsteps in the hallway. She straightened. Not because she was performing composure, but because she needed it structurally. She needed the line of her spine to be straight for what was coming. Min-jae came through the door. 6 years is a long time. It changes people in ways that are hard to look at directly, because looking directly means acknowledging that you were not there for the changes, that you missed them, that whatever you thought you knew about a person is working from outdated information. Amara looked at Min-jae and felt this, the recognition and the strangeness of it together, the face she knew and the lines in it that were new, the way he held himself, slightly different, weighted differently. He looked at her with an expression she could not read, which was familiar. He looked at Joy. Joy turned her head and looked at him from the side of her face still pressed against Amara's ribs, the guarded, assessing look of a child who had learned to read rooms. You canceled it, Amara said. It was not a thank you. It was a confirmation. Yes. I have the clinic paperwork, the original order. She held up the folder. She listed herself as Joy's guardian. She ordered a bone marrow preliminary draw in addition to a blood donation, without my consent, without yours. His expression did something very controlled and very contained. I know. Do you understand what that means? Yes. Because if you're going to stand there and tell me it was a mistake, I'm not going to tell you that. His voice was quiet. The specific kind of quiet that meant the noise was being suppressed, not absent. She looked at him for a moment. She looked at the man she had spent 6 years constructing a version of in her memory. The man she had left, the man she had protected from a distance, the man she had allowed herself to hate and love in the alternating, exhausting pattern of someone who had never properly resolved either. And she felt, more than anything, tired. I need you to run a DNA test, she said, today, with a lab that Yuna has no connection to. He nodded once. I've already made the call. She had not expected that. Something shifted in her slightly, not forgiveness, not anything close to that, but the specific recalibration of someone who is prepared for a fight and found the terrain slightly different than anticipated. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Joy looked between them with the focused attention of a child who understands that something large is happening and has decided to be very still about it. The DNA results came back in 4 hours. Dr. Shin processed them personally, at Min-jae's insistence, at a lab in Gangnam with no connection to Yuna's network. Min-jae had spent the waiting time identifying every thread of her influence in the medical facilities he had previously used, and the number was larger than he had allowed himself to suspect, which sat in him like a stone. He read the results in his office, alone. Joy was his daughter. The numbers were unambiguous, the kind of certainty that does not leave room for alternative interpretations. He sat with the paper in his hands and felt something go through him that he would not have been able to name. Not one emotion, but the specific density of several arriving at the same time. 6 years. A child who existed and whom he had not known about. A child who had sat across from him 4 days ago and told him her mother was sick and asked if he would remember them. A child he had initially received with suspicion, with cold, managed suspicion, because that was what Yuna's framing had produced in him. Amara is trying to manipulate you. This child is a scheme. Be careful. Be careful. He had looked at Joy across that sitting room and felt the pull that he had refused to examine, because examining it would have required looking at everything else too. He set the paper down. He sat with himself for a moment, which was not something he often permitted. Then he picked up the folder that Ryu had assembled over the last 3 hours. Everything that could be pulled quickly about the clinic in Mappo, about the doctor Yuna had used, about the financial trail of the appointment, about the specific nature of what had been ordered. And beneath that, because Ryu was thorough in the way of a man who understands what his employer actually needs versus what he asks for, a second set of documents. Medical records. Anonymous blood donations made to the private fund that had covered Min-jae's treatment over a 3-year period beginning 6 years ago. The donations were listed by blood type, by date, by amount. They had come from a single recurring donor. He looked at the blood type. He looked at the dates. He thought about Amara standing in front of him an hour ago, looking like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had gotten so used to it that she no longer noticed the posture it required of her. He thought about her body, the way she had been standing, the particular quality of tired that was in her that was not just emotional, something physical, something that had been going on for longer than this morning, longer than this week. He thought about what she had said. She's sick. He thought about repeated blood donations over a 3-year period from a single donor who was already, at the time, dealing with a progressive condition. He thought about what that cost a body. He put the folder down on the desk and pressed both palms flat against the surface and looked at the wall in front of him and stayed like that for a long time. He found Yuna in the East Wing. She had regrouped. He could see it, the composure restored, the expression arranged, the specific readiness of a woman who has decided that the best defense available to her is to go on offense. She had changed her jacket, which was a detail that told him everything about her relationship to performance. She looked, to anyone who did not know her, like a woman who was about to have a difficult but manageable conversation. She opened her mouth. He set the DNA results on the table. She looked at them. "Joy is my daughter," he said. "Min-jae, don't." He set the medical records next to the DNA results. 6 years of anonymous blood donations, to my treatment fund, from a single donor. You want to tell me whose blood type that is? She looked at the papers. Something moved across her face, very fast, very small, the thing underneath the thing she showed people. And then it was gone and she was back to composed. But he had seen it. He had not been looking at her right for years. He understood that now, and he had seen it. "She manipulated you," Yuna said. "She left. She chose to leave. Whatever she did after, why did she leave? Because she decided, what did you tell her?" His voice dropped in a way that was not softness. "In that supply room. At the clinic. 6 years ago." Her chin came up, fractionally. "I don't know what you're—" "A nurse named Park Ji-yeon. She was on shift the evening you came to the clinic 6 years ago. She saw you go into the supply room with Amara." He paused. "Ryu found her this morning. She's been retired for 2 years. She had nothing to protect anymore." Another pause. "What did you tell her?" Yuna was quiet for the first time since he had come in. The quiet was not the composed kind. It was the kind that comes from a calculation failing to complete fast enough. "I told her the truth," Yuna said finally, "that she was not someone who belonged in your world, that her presence was a liability. With documents. A beat. I showed her some documentation about the risks. Documents you made. Not a question. She looked at him. Documents you paid for, he said. That told her my condition was more serious than it was. That told her my family structure could not accommodate a foreign woman and an unplanned child. He looked at her face, at the architecture of it, the years of careful presentation. Documents that made her believe that leaving me was the only way to keep me alive. Yuna held his gaze. It took effort. He could see that now, too. She was wrong for you, she said. Everything I did because I could see what you needed, and she wasn't. She donated blood for 3 years. He said it without heat, without volume, just the fact placed in the space between them. While she was sick, while she was raising our daughter alone, while I was here telling myself she left for money. He looked at Yuna. Where is Lily's biological father? The room went still. Yuna's face did something it had never done in front of him before. Not a crumble. She did not crumble. It was not in her, but a fracture. A small, precise fracture along the line she had been holding for 5 years. That's not relevant. Answer me. She said nothing. He looked at her for a long moment. He looked at the woman he had lived alongside for 5 years, the woman who had given him a child he had believed was his, the woman who had built a life inside his household on a foundation of things that had never been true. He looked at her and felt nothing that resembled what he expected to feel. Not rage, not betrayal in any dramatic sense, just the specific, vast exhaustion of a man who has been living inside a lie so complete that dismantling it meant dismantling almost everything he thought he knew about the last 6 years of his life. Get out of this house, he said. Min-jae, take whatever you need. You have 2 hours. He turned toward the door. Lily stays. She stood up fast. You can't. Lily stays, he said again. I will make appropriate arrangements. She is not going to be used as leverage. Not by you. He put his hand on the doorframe. Not by anyone. He did not wait for her response. He walked down the hall and down the stairs and into the sitting room where Amara was still with Joy, and the two of them looked up when he came in, and he looked at Amara's face, the exhaustion in it, the wariness, the specific look of a woman who has been waiting for years for something to either resolve or... And he said, I need to show you something. He held out the medical records, the donation files. She looked at them. She took them. She read the dates and the blood type and the amounts, and he watched her face as she understood what she was looking at, what it confirmed about what she had done, what it meant that he was showing it to her, what it said about the conversation he had just come from. Her hands tightened on the paper, very slightly. She told you, Amara said. She told me enough. He paused. The rest, I figured out. Joy was watching them both with those eyes. Those specific, direct, devastating eyes. Amara lowered the paper. She looked at him. He looked back. The room held what it held. 6 years. A child. A lie that had cost both of them things that could not be returned, and neither of them tried to say something that would make it less than it was. Then Min-jae's phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was Ryu. He answered. Ryu's voice came through, low and rapid. Min-jae listened. His expression shifted, not dramatically, but the specific shift of a man receiving information that changes the immediate shape of the problem. He hung up. Yuna is gone, he said. She left the compound 10 minutes ago. He paused. She took Lily. Amara went still. You said she had 2 hours. I know what I said. I was already moving, already reaching for his jacket, already doing the thing he did when a situation required action, which was to compress everything else into a single point of focus. She didn't wait. He stopped in the doorway and looked back at Amara and Joy, his daughter sitting on the bench with her rabbit backpack, his daughter's mother standing next to her holding documents that told the story of 6 years he had wasted believing the wrong person. And he understood, with the clarity that only arrives when there is absolutely nothing left to manage or postpone, that everything that came next was going to require him to be a different kind of man than the one he had been. Not the man who ran an empire, not the man who controlled everything from a distance and kept himself armored inside the logic of power and leverage and the cold management of other people's choices. The man who had a daughter. 2 of them, now. One by blood and one by the specific accident of having been the person in Joy's life who held the title of father while Lily had grown up calling him by it. Both of them were out there. One of them was with Yuna. He looked at Amara. I need your help, he said. It was possibly the hardest sentence he had spoken in 6 years, and she could hear that in it, and she did not make him repeat it. She picked up her coat. Ryu had 3 men on Yuna's vehicle within 8 minutes. That was the part of Min-jae's world that operated on a different clock than everything else. The response infrastructure, the network of contacts and position personnel that made the Baekryong syndicate functional in the practical, unglamorous sense of the word. Not dramatic, just fast. Ryu had been building and maintaining that network for 9 years, and he ran it now with the specific efficiency of someone who understood that speed was the difference between a problem and a catastrophe. The vehicle, a black SUV registered to a shell company Yuna had been using for personal logistics for 3 years, which Ryu had flagged and tracked 18 months ago because tracking things was what Ryu did, had left the compound's north entrance and moved toward the Han River Expressway, heading east. That meant Incheon or beyond. That meant she had a destination already planned, which meant she had been planning it before today, which meant that at some level Yuna had known this moment was coming and had prepared for it the way she prepared for everything. Min-jae absorbed this information while he was still moving down the hallway toward the garage, Amara 2 steps behind him, and Joy. They had left Joy with the compound's housekeeper, a woman named Mrs. O, who had worked there for 11 years, and who had looked at Joy with the specific warmth of someone who had been watching Min-jae be alone for too long. In the sitting room with the rabbit backpack and instructions to stay put, Joy had looked at Amara when they told her to stay. "How long?" she asked. "Not long," Amara said. "I promise." Joy had accepted this with the composure that Amara had given her, which was both her greatest gift to her daughter and the thing that occasionally broke Amara's heart. The way Joy had learned so young to hold herself together because someone had to. They were in the car before Amara finished the thought. Min-jae drove. This surprised her. She had assumed Ryu, or one of the other men, but Min-jae got behind the wheel with the manner of someone for whom ceding control of the vehicle was not currently an option. She sat in the passenger seat and did not comment on it, because she understood the psychology of it, and because she had other things to focus on. "Where is she going?" Amara said. "East, toward Incheon possibly. She has a property there. Not in her name, in the name of a company she controls. We've known about it." "You've known about it." "We track assets." His voice was flat. "It's what we do." She looked at the side of his face, the jaw, the controlled tension in it, the specific quality of a man driving fast on a highway at 9:30 in the morning with his hands very still on the wheel. "Do you think Lily is okay?" "Yes." He said it without hesitation. "She won't hurt Lily. Lily is what she has left." Amara processed that. "She'll use her." "Yes." "As leverage." "It's what she knows." Amara looked at the road ahead. The morning light was flat and gray, the kind of October light that did not commit to anything. She thought about Lily, a child she had never met, a child who was entirely innocent of all of it, who had grown up calling a man her father who was not her father and had never been told otherwise, who was going to have to absorb that truth at some point and had not been given any preparation for it. She thought about what that was going to cost a 5-year-old. She thought about how she did not have the luxury of feeling things about that right now. "She has people with her," Min-jae said. 2 men. They're loyal to her personally, not to the syndicate. She's been running a separate payroll. He said this last part with the specific flatness of someone filing a thing under things I should have seen. "Ryu's men are following at distance. No contact until I give the word." "And when you give the word?" "Depends on what she does when she stops." Amara nodded. She put her hand in her coat pocket and felt the edge of the folder. The clinic documents, the donation records. She had brought them without thinking, the reflex of someone who had learned to keep evidence close to her body, because evidence was the only currency she had ever had. "Min-jae." "Yeah. If something goes wrong, it won't. But if it does." She waited until he glanced at her. "Joy stays here, in Seoul, with you. Whatever happens to me, whatever happens with the paperwork, whatever happens with, nothing is going to happen to you. I need you to say it." He was quiet for a moment. The car held 80 kilometers per hour on the expressway, and the city thinned out around them into the gray sprawl of the Han River corridor. "Joy stays," he said, "with me. Whatever happens. He paused. But nothing is going to happen to you. She looked back at the road. She did not believe him completely, because her body had been telling her a different story for 2 years, and bodies were generally more honest than the people who occupied them. But she believed he meant it, which was something different, and in this particular moment, enough. Yuna's car stopped at a commercial building in the Namdong district of Incheon 47 minutes after leaving the compound. Ryu's man called it in. Min-jae took the call on the car's speaker, and Amara listened to the address, the building description. 4 floors. A food distribution company on the lower 2 upper floors converted to private space. The number of visible exits. The confirmation that both of Yuna's men were with her, that Lily had been seen going in. Min-jae ended the call. I know this building, he said. From before? It belonged to a man named Choi, real estate. He had syndicate connections, outer circle, not inner. He stopped. He said nothing for a moment. He and Yuna had a relationship, some years ago. Amara turned to look at him. He kept his eyes on the road. Lily's blood type is different from mine, he said. I had noted it. I did not... He stopped again. I did not let myself follow that where it led. She did not say anything. There was nothing to say that would help. I believed what I wanted to believe, he said. That's the truth of it. He said it with the specific economy of a man who has just done something very difficult and has no interest in being observed doing it. She turned back to the road. How far out are we? She asked. 6 minutes. They parked 2 blocks from the building, behind a row of industrial supply vehicles that provided cover. Ryu's car was already there, and Ryu himself was standing outside it with 2 of his men, all of them with the contained energy of people who are doing nothing and ready for everything. Min-jae got out. Amara got out. Ryu looked at Amara, then at Min-jae. He did not comment on her presence. She's on the 3rd floor, Ryu said. 1 stairwell, 1 elevator. Fire exit on the east side. He held out a tablet with a building schematic. Choi's office space. It was converted about 3 years ago. She has a key. Building management confirmed someone matching her description has accessed it regularly. Min-jae looked at the schematic. Her 2 men. 1 at the stairwell on the ground floor. 1 we think is with her on 3. Ryu paused. The man on the ground floor is Park Sung-woo. You know him. He used to run security for the Songpa chapter. He switched allegiances about 18 months ago. We tracked the pay transfer but didn't escalate it. Ryu said this without flinching, which was the right call, acknowledging a failure without editorializing it. You can move him without noise? Yes. Do that first. Ryu nodded at one of his men, who separated from the group and moved toward the building in the unhurried manner of someone with a specific task, and no need to advertise it. Min-jae looked at the schematic for another moment. Then he handed the tablet back to Ryu. I'm going up. I'll come. No. He looked at Ryu. You stay here. If she has other contacts I don't know about, I don't want this location understaffed. He turned to Amara. You're not coming up. She had been expecting this. She'll listen to me more than she'll listen to you. She's not going to listen to anyone. Min-jae, she has 2 men, and I have 1 entrance, and Lily is in that room. His voice was level and direct and had no room in it for negotiation. You are not putting your body between me and whatever's happening in there. She looked at him. He looked back. You have a child, he said, who is currently sitting in my house with a rabbit backpack waiting for you to come back. So you stay here. She wanted to argue. She measured the argument against the reality of her body, which had been telling her for weeks that it was running a deficit it could not cover, and against Joy's face, and against the specific math of what it would mean for Joy if she went into that building and something happened. She stayed. Min-jae crossed the street and entered the building's side entrance. The one Ryu's man had confirmed was accessible, moving with the quiet, particular speed of someone who learned long ago that the way you walk into a room determines a great deal about what happens inside it. The ground floor smelled like cardboard and industrial cleaning fluid. The stairwell light was fluorescent, and one of the tubes was dying, blinking irregularly in a way that made the shadows shift. He went up. 3rd floor. The door at the top of the stairwell was metal, heavy, with a wired glass panel at eye level. Through it, he could see a long corridor with exposed ductwork and stripped concrete walls. Converted space, not finished, the kind of place that announced its temporary nature in every surface. He could hear voices. One of them was Lily. She was not crying. She was talking in the slightly elevated pitch of a child who is uncomfortable and processing it through speech. Questions, probably, the endless questions of a 5-year-old trying to understand a situation that the adults around her were not explaining. He heard Yuna's voice underneath it, lower, attempting patience. He pushed through the door. The corridor was 30 meters long. Yuna's second man was posted at the far end, outside a door that stood slightly ajar. He heard Min-jae the moment the stairwell door moved, not from sound, because Min-jae was quiet, but from the air pressure change, the specific atmospheric shift of an enclosed space having its equilibrium disturbed. He turned. He was a man named Cha who had worked for Yuna's personal security for 2 years and who understood, in the moment he made eye contact with Kang Min-jae moving down that corridor toward him, that he had been substantially misinformed about how this afternoon was going to go. Min-jae did not slow down. Cha made a decision, the wrong one, which was to try to hold position. Min-jae covered the distance between them in the time it took Cha to register that holding position was the wrong decision, and then there was a brief and entirely one-sided encounter that left Cha sitting against the wall with his phone in pieces on the floor and his keys in Min-jae's hand. Min-jae opened the door. So, the room was a large open-plan office space, the kind that had never been properly furnished. Folding table, 3 chairs, a window that looked out over the Namdong district's industrial sprawl. Yuna was standing at the window with her back to the door. Lily was on one of the chairs, still in the clothes she had been wearing at the compound. Her shoes on the wrong feet, the way children's shoes often ended up when they dressed in a hurry or under stress. She was holding a juice box that was nearly empty, working the straw with the mechanical focus of someone who needed something to do with their hands. She looked up when Min-jae came in. "Father," she said, and the word arrived in him with its full weight. "Hey." He kept his voice even. "You okay?" She nodded. Her expression said she was not entirely sure what okay was supposed to feel like right now, but she was working toward it. Yuna turned from the window. She had been crying, or something adjacent to it. Not the performance of it, but the actual physical residue of it, which on Yuna was strange to see because she had always managed to keep that specific evidence private. Her eyes were slightly swollen. Her composure was present, but it was assembled rather than natural. You could see the seams in it. "Min-jae." She said it with a steadiness that cost her something. "It's over, Yuna." He said it directly. "Whatever you were planning, wherever you were going from here, it's over." "I'm not going anywhere." She moved slightly. Not toward him, just a shift in position, the unconscious movement of someone adjusting to a changed terrain. "I needed to think. You took Lily out of the compound without telling anyone. You left in under an hour." He looked at her. "Where were you going?" She was quiet. "There's a flight," he said, "out of Incheon International. Choi Dae-won booked it 2 days ago. 2 adult passengers, 1 child." He watched her face. "Ryu found it this morning, before we left." Yuna's jaw tightened. "You were going to run," he said, "with Lily and Choi." "I was protecting her. From what?" Not loud, not heated, just implacable. "What were you protecting her from, specifically, by taking her out of the country without telling me?" "From the truth," Yuna said, and it came out with an honesty that surprised them both. She caught it, tried to pull it back, but it was already in the room. "From what happens when it all comes out, the DNA, She stopped. "She thinks you're her father. She's 5 years old. You're going to tell her—" "I'm not going to tell her anything today." He said it quietly. "I'm going to bring her home. And we're going to figure out how to do this without destroying her. That's what's happening." He paused. "But it doesn't happen with you on a plane to wherever Choi is waiting." Yuna looked at him. The composure was doing something complicated. Holding and failing and holding again, the structure of someone who has been strong for so long that they have forgotten what they were protecting underneath it. "You hate me," she said. "No." He said it simply. "I'm done. That's different." She looked at Lily, who was watching them with the focused attention of a child who understands that the adults in the room are deciding something important and has learned to wait for the outcome. "She loves you," Yuna said. Her voice had changed, gone softer in a way that was not manipulation, just true. Whatever I did, whatever the rest of it is, she genuinely loves you. I didn't manufacture that. I know. He looked at Lily. That's why she's coming home with me. And me? Yuna asked. He looked at her for a moment. At the woman who had reorganized 6 years of his life around a lie. At the woman who had taken a 6-year-old child to a clinic and signed documents she had no right to sign and had been ready to take something from Joy's body to solve a problem she had created. At the woman who had stood in a supply room and handed a frightened young mother falsified documents and told her that leaving was the only way to save the man she loved. At the woman who was, also and simultaneously, standing in a half-finished room in Incheon, looking at the child she had genuinely loved in the only way she knew how, which was controlling and imperfect and ultimately destructive, but not empty. He was not capable of hatred right now. He did not have the energy for it, and it was not useful, and it was not, he realized, what he actually felt. What he felt was the vast weight of consequence, of choices, hers, his, Amara's, all of them, arriving at their natural ends. There are people who want to speak with you, he said, about the clinic documents, about the medical records, about the financial arrangements you've been running through the syndicate's accounts. He held the door. You're going to speak with them. Yuna looked at him. Lily will be taken care of. His voice did not waver. I said it at the compound and I'm saying it now. She is not a piece of this. Yuna looked at Lily one more time. Lily looked back at her with those dark eyes, Choi's eyes, though none of them said that out loud. And she reached across the space between them and touched Yuna's hand, because she was 5 years old and she could feel that something was wrong and touching was what she knew to do about that. Yuna's composure broke, not dramatically, just the specific quiet crack of something that had been held too long finally releasing. She pressed her mouth together. She turned her face away. She put her free hand over Lily's small one and held it for a moment. Then she let go. She walked toward the door. She stopped in front of Min-jae and looked up at him, and she said, in a voice that was stripped of everything performative, I genuinely thought she was wrong for you. That's where it started. That's the truth of it. He looked at her. The truth of it, he said, is that it doesn't matter where it started. He stepped aside. She walked through the door. He crouched down to Lily's level. She looked at him with the specific confused wariness of a child who has been in a strange place and wants to understand what comes next. Are we going home? She asked. Yeah, he said. We're going home. Is my mom coming? He looked at her face. Not right now, but you're going to see her. He picked up her abandoned juice box from the table. She's okay. She's going to be okay. He did not know if that was true in any complete sense. He said it because she was 5 and she needed something to hold on to, and he was the adult in the room, and that was his job. She slid off the chair and picked up a small stuffed animal from underneath it. A rabbit, worn at the ears, that she had apparently carried in her coat pocket through all of this, and she held it against her chest. He took her hand and walked her out. Amara was on the street in front of the building when they came out. She was not where he had left her. She had moved, which he had expected, because telling Amara to stay somewhere was more of a suggestion than a directive and had always been. She was standing 20 meters from the entrance with her arms crossed against the cold, and she looked up when the door opened, and her eyes went first to Min-jae's face and then to Lily's. Lily looked at Amara. Amara looked at Lily. Neither of them spoke for a moment, and in that moment, the gray October street, the industrial smell of Namdong, the exhaust of passing trucks, and the distant sound of the port, something happened that was not dramatic and was not scripted and was not easy. Amara looked at this child, this 5-year-old who had no fault in any of it and every one of its consequences, and she felt the thing she had been keeping back because she needed to keep it back, and then she let it be there, just briefly, in the line of her face. Lily looked at her and said, Your coat is the same color as Joy's jacket. Amara blinked. Is it? Yellow. Lily pointed at the trim on Amara's lapel. Joy has a yellow jacket. She does, Amara said. You've been talking to Joy? She taught me a handshake. Lily demonstrated it, one-handed, using the rabbit as a partner. She made it up herself. Amara looked at Min-jae over the top of Lily's head. He looked back at her with an expression she was only now beginning to learn to read again. The real one, underneath the management. The one that had been there in the clinic hallway 6 years ago when she knelt down next to a bleeding man and refused to step back. Ryu appeared at Min-jae's shoulder. Yuna is in the car, 2 of my men with her. He paused. Park Sung-woo is detained, no injuries. The flight, Min-jae said, cancelled. Choi Dae-won has been contacted by the relevant parties. Ryu used the phrase relevant parties with the specific neutrality of a man who understood the value of not being specific. Min-jae nodded. He looked at Amara. We need to go back. There are people I need to deal with, lawyers, the syndicate's internal board, the clinic documents. It's going to take the rest of the day, and probably tomorrow. I know. Joy is still at the compound. I know. You don't have to be there while I'll be there, she said. Simply. No more than that. He looked at her for a moment. Okay, he said. The drive back was quieter than the drive out. Lily fell asleep in the back seat within 20 minutes, which was the privilege of children who were exhausted. They could simply leave. The stuffed rabbit was wedged under her chin. She breathed with the deep, uncomplicated rhythm of someone who had processed as much as she was going to process today and had closed the window on the rest. Amara watched the road. The lawyers are going to want the clinic documents, Min-jae said. I have copies. There are people on the syndicate's board who are going to want this handled internally. The forged medical records, the financial arrangements. They're going to want to manage the exposure. And what do you want? He drove. I want it done right. I want it in front of people who can actually hold her accountable. He paused. The clinic documents go to the police. The financial records go to the board. Both happen. She looked at him. That's going to cost you. Yes. The board won't like it. No. And you're going to do it anyway. He was quiet for a moment. I spent 6 years believing a version of events that I could have questioned at any point. I chose not to because it was easier than the alternative. He checked the mirror. I'm done doing things because they're easier than the alternative. She turned back to the road. She thought about what that cost him to say. She thought about what it had cost her to hear it. Not the relief she might have expected, but something more complicated. Something that required her to adjust the story she had been carrying for 6 years. To make room for a man who had been wrong and who was now standing in his wrongness without trying to perform his way out of it. She was not ready to call it forgiveness. She was not sure forgiveness was the right category. She was ready to call it the beginning of something she did not yet have a name for. My treatment schedule, she said. I need to get back on it. I've been off the medications because of the cost, and that's already handled. She turned to look at him. He kept his eyes on the road. I made 3 calls this morning, before we left the compound. Dr. Shin is already pulling the records. He paused. It should have been handled years ago. The money was always there. He stopped. Didn't know, she said. Didn't know, he confirmed. She turned back to the road. In the back seat, Lily made a small sound in her sleep and pulled the rabbit closer. Amara thought about Joy, about the rabbit backpack and the yellow jacket and the handshake she had apparently invented and taught to a stranger's child in 4 days. She thought about the specific stubbornness of her daughter, which she had watched emerge from the very first days in the NICU, that refusal to comply with the expectations of whatever room she was in. She thought about what it was going to take to put this back together, not the logistics of it, the lawyers, the paperwork, the medical arrangements, the slow untangling of 6 years of consequences. But the other thing, the harder thing, the thing you could not schedule or fund or manage with the right contacts. She thought about trust, about what it took to rebuild it, about whether she was capable of it, about whether he was, about whether the answer to both questions needed to be yes before they could start. She thought it probably did not. She thought you probably started before you were ready, the way she had started everything else, the way she had knelt down in that hallway 6 years ago before she had any idea what she was kneeling into, the way she had gotten on the bathroom floor with a pregnancy test before she had processed what any outcome would mean, the way she had put Joy in Ms. Han's car and sent her to a stranger's compound on the logic that the alternative was worse. You started before you were ready. You dealt with what came. She was still sitting with this when Min-jae's phone buzzed on the console between them. He glanced at it. His expression changed. What? She said. He handed her the phone without speaking. It was a message from Ryu. 4 words and an attachment. The 4 words were, "She went to press." The attachment was a photograph, a screenshot of a news site's breaking notification, 30 minutes old. A headline, a name, Kang Min-jae. A claim, criminal enterprise, falsified documents, coercion of medical staff. And a source, named at the bottom of the notification in the small gray text of a legal disclosure. Yuna Seo. Amara held the phone. She looked at the timestamp. 30 minutes ago, while they were still driving back, while Yuna was in Ryu's car, with Ryu's men, theoretically in custody. She had it pre-scheduled, Amara said. Yes. A contingency. Yes. She handed the phone back. She thought about the charity event, the Syndicate's Foundation Gala, which she had seen referenced in the schedule that had been left in the sitting room, 2 days from now, the one that the Syndicate used for its public-facing operations. She thought about how Yuna had been invited, because she was always invited, because she had made herself indispensable to the appearance of respectability that the Baekryong Foundation maintained. She thought about the guest list and the cameras and the press access that came with a charity event of that size. She thought about what Yuna would do with that access if she was not stopped before she reached it. The gala, Amara said. Min-jae's hands tightened on the wheel, very slightly. 2 days, he said. She's going to be there. Yes. She's going to say everything there, in front of everyone, everything she can use. Amara paused. About you. About the Syndicate. About me. She felt something settle in her. Not calm exactly, but the specific quality of someone who has identified the terrain and is done being surprised by it. She's going to say, I abandoned you for money. She's going to say joy is a scheme. She's going to say everything she needs to say to make herself the wronged party. Yes, he said. That's what she's going to do. And if she does it in front of that audience, the board will have no choice but to respond to the public exposure. The legitimate business operations take a hit. The foundation, he stopped. It's significant. So we need to be there first, Amara said. He looked at her. I'll be there, she said. I'll tell them. All of it. What happened 6 years ago, what Yuna did, the clinic, the donations, all of it. She paused. You can't be the one to say it. They'll hear it as defense, but if I say it, it puts you in front of every camera at that event. I know. It puts your name in the story, Joy's name. I know. She said it steadily. But Joy's name is already in the story. Yuna made sure of that when she scheduled that clinic appointment. She turned to look at him fully. I am not going to let her tell our story. Not her version of it. The highway stretched ahead of them. Seoul's skyline was visible on the horizon, its towers catching the midday light with the flat, indifferent brightness of a city that had seen everything and remembered very little. Min-jae drove. He drove and he thought, and he was quiet in the way of someone who has run the calculation and arrived at a result that is not comfortable but is clear. I'll arrange for you to be on the guest list, he said. Good. It's going to be. I know what it's going to be. He looked at her. She looked back. In the back seat, Lily slept on, the rabbit against her chest, her shoes still on the wrong feet, entirely and completely untouched by the decision that had just been made in the front seat of the car above her. The decision that in 48 hours would put Amara Bennett in front of every significant member of Seoul's legitimate and illegitimate power structure, in the full light of cameras, at a microphone she had not been invited to use. The decision that would require her to stand in a room full of people who had spent 6 years hearing a different version of her and say, let me tell you what actually happened. The decision that Min-jae was already reaching for his phone to begin arranging. He made the first call while the car was still moving, and his voice when he spoke was the voice she had first heard in a clinic hallway, stripped of performance, direct, carrying the specific weight of someone who had decided that the thing coming next was going to be faced directly or not at all. She listened to him make the call. She looked at the skyline. She thought about what she was going to say when she got to that microphone. She thought about Joy, sitting in a compound in northern Seoul with a rabbit backpack and a handshake she had invented herself, waiting for her mother to come back. She thought about the word promise and what it cost when you made it and what it cost when you kept it. She breathed in. She breathed out. The skyline came closer. The gala was held at the Baekryong Foundation's event center in Mapo, a building that had been designed to announce legitimacy, all glass and clean lines, and the kind of architectural confidence that said, "We belong here. We have always belonged here. Do not look too carefully at how we got here." 240 guests, journalists with press credentials that had been vetted by the foundation's PR firm, board members of the syndicate's above-ground operations, their wives and partners, their lawyers, city officials who maintained careful relationships with the foundation's charitable arm. The kind of crowd that understood the rules of a room like this, that you did not ask certain questions, that the money that funded the children's hospitals and the literacy programs and the disaster relief funds came from a world they had collectively agreed not to examine too directly. Yuna had been on the guest list for 3 years. She had co-chaired the event's planning committee for 2 of them. She arrived 40 minutes before the program started, in a black dress and the composure of a woman who had spent the last 48 hours rebuilding her architecture from the inside out. The news story she had released had produced exactly what she intended. A low-frequency hum of speculation, not enough to be a scandal yet, enough to be the kindling for one. She had given the journalist enough to print but held back enough to deploy in person, here, tonight, in front of the people whose opinion of Min-jae actually shaped what happened to him. She had one goal, to speak first, to establish the version of events in this room before anyone else could. She did not know that Amara was already inside. Amara had arrived 90 minutes early, with Min-jae's head of legal affairs, a woman named Baek, who wore glasses with no frames and spoke in the precise, unhurried sentences of someone who had been building cases for 20 years, and 2 of Min-jae's board members who had, after a 3-hour meeting the previous day, decided that controlled transparency was preferable to the alternative. She had been put in a room off the main hall to wait. It was a small room, used for catering prep, and it smelled like warming food and cut flowers, and she sat on a folding chair next to a tray of appetizers she did not touch, and looked at her own hands and thought about nothing useful. Joy was at the compound with Mrs. O and Lily. She had hugged Joy before she left. Joy had held on for 3 seconds longer than usual, which was Joy's version of saying she was scared, and Amara had held the back of her daughter's head and breathed, and then let go, because letting go was what tonight required. Min-jae came into the prep room 20 minutes before the program. He was in a suit that cost more than 3 months of Amara's old clinic salary, and he looked like what he was, a man who had been in rooms like this his whole adult life and had learned to wear them the way other people wore clothes. But underneath that, in the set of his jaw and the specific quality of his stillness, was something she recognized from the clinic hallway. The man underneath the performance, the one who was actually scared and was not going to let that change what he did. "The board chair is going to introduce the program," he said. "After the foundation's annual report is presented, there will be a donor remarks segment. That's where Yuna is going to make her move. She'll request the floor. She's done it before. They'll give it to her." He paused. "I need you to speak before that. Can you arrange it?" "Baek is handling it. She's already spoken to the moderator." He looked at her. "You don't have to do this the way you planned. I can have our lawyers present the documentation instead." "No." She said it immediately. "Documents don't have a face. She's going to stand up there, and she's going to be a person, and everyone in that room is going to look at her face while she talks." Amara looked at him. "I need to be a person too." He was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to say?" he asked. "The truth." She paused. "All of it, including the parts that make me look bad." He looked at her. "I left," she said. "I chose to believe a lie because I was scared and I was 26, and I loved you more than I trusted myself. That's part of the truth. I'm not going to stand up there and be a perfect victim because I'm not one." She held his gaze. "But I'm also not going to let her be the only voice in that room." He looked at her for a long moment, at her face, which was tired in the way that had become its baseline, and determined in the way that had always been its baseline, and something else, something that he had been putting words to slowly over the last 48 hours and had not quite finished. "Okay," he said. He turned to go. "Min-jae?" He stopped. She said, "When it's done, when all of this is done, I need time. I'm not saying no to anything. I'm saying I need time." He turned back enough to see her. "However long," he said. She nodded. He left. She sat alone with the warming food and the cut flowers and the weight of what she was about to do, and she breathed, and she went over what she was going to say one more time in the quiet of her own mind. and she let herself be imperfect and afraid and tired, because she was all of those things, and the room did not know it yet, but it was going to. Oh, the program began at 7. Amara stood in the wings of the small stage at the front of the hall and watched the board chair deliver opening remarks and watched 240 people in expensive clothes hold glasses and look attentive, and felt the specific surreality of being backstage at the machinery of a world she had never belonged to and had never wanted to belong to. She scanned the room. She found Yuna in the third row, left side, seated beside a man she did not recognize. Yuna's posture was perfect. Her attention was on the stage with the focused patience of a woman waiting for her moment, which was exactly what it was. Amara watched her. She thought about the supply room, the folder of false documents, the specific, calibrated voice of someone who had decided that what they were doing was necessary and had organized that necessity into something that looked like kindness. She thought about Joy at 6 weeks old in an incubator, too small, working so hard at the basic project of staying. She thought about Min-jae sitting alone in the Yongsan apartment, reading a letter that told him a lie he believed for 6 years. She thought about the blood draws, the form where the amounts were listed, the progression of dates across 3 years, regular as a heartbeat. The Foundation's annual report finished. Polite applause. The moderator, a woman named Jung who had been doing this for 8 years and who had, Amara sensed, been very carefully briefed by Baek, stepped to the microphone. Before we move to our donor remarks segment, the Foundation is asked to include a brief statement from a member of our community, Ms. Amara Bennett. The name landed in the room with the quiet impact of something dropped into still water. Amara felt the quality of attention shift, 240 people doing the rapid unconscious calculation of who that was and why she was here and what it meant that her name was being said at this microphone. She watched Yuna's head turn. She walked onto the stage. The lights were warm and the microphone was at exactly the wrong height, and she adjusted it with hands that were completely steady, which surprised her because she had expected them to shake. She looked out at the room. She found Min-jae, standing at the back near the doors, not at a table, not seated, just present. He looked at her and said nothing. She did not need him to say anything. She looked at Yuna. Yuna looked back at her with an expression that was the most unguarded thing Amara had ever seen on her face. Just, briefly, the raw reaction of someone whose plan has encountered an obstacle they did not fully account for. Amara began. She did not start with the beginning. She started with the supply room, because the supply room was the center of it, the thing that everything else orbited. She described it plainly. The clinic, the evening, the folder of documents, what Yuna had said word by word as best as she could reconstruct it, the tone of it, the specific language of someone who had done their research and knew exactly what would land. She said, "I believed her. I want to be clear about that. I was 26 years old, and I was pregnant, and I was afraid, and I had a folder of documents that looked real, and a woman who knew exactly which fears to press. I made a choice. It was my choice, and I have lived with it." She said, "I left a man I loved because I was told that leaving was the only way to save him. I did not know the documents were false. I did not know what I was walking away from. I know that does not excuse 6 years of silence. I am not asking for it to." She said, "What I am asking is for this room to understand what happened, because there are documents being circulated right now with my name on them that tell a different story, and the people circulating them were in that supply room, and they know exactly what was in that folder." She paused. She said, "I spent the next 3 years donating blood to cover the cost of a man's medical treatments, a man who thought I had abandoned him. I did this because I could not live with the alternative, which was to do nothing. I have the records. They are available." She said, "6 years ago I had a daughter. Her name is Joy. She is 6 years old. She is her father's daughter in ways I cannot explain and do not need to. She arrived at this man's house 4 days ago because her mother is sick and needed him to know she existed. She arrived carrying a necklace I have had since I was 19 years old. She is the only person in this entire story who did nothing wrong and has paid for everything anyway." She stopped. She breathed. She said, "I am not here to destroy anyone. I am here because my daughter deserves a version of the truth that has her in it. I am here because a man I know made a mistake he is trying to correct, and the people in this room are the ones who will decide whether that is possible. And I am here because I am the only person who can stand at this microphone and tell you what actually happened in that supply room 6 years ago, and I am not going to let someone else tell it first." She stepped back from the microphone. The room was quiet in the specific way that meant the quiet was not emptiness but mass. 240 people holding something they had not expected to be holding when they arrived at a charity gala on a Thursday evening. She walked off the stage. She was in the corridor outside the hall when she heard the applause start. Not the polite, automatic kind, but the other kind, the kind with body in it, that starts in a few places and then fills the rest. She stood in the corridor and listened to it and felt it somewhere in her sternum, and then she turned and walked to the end of the corridor and sat down on a bench against the wall and put her face in her hands for exactly 30 seconds. Not crying. Just the absence of performance, briefly, in a place where nobody could see it. Then she took her hands away from her face and straightened her back and breathed. Beck found her 2 minutes later with the expression of a woman who has just watched something she did not anticipate succeed in a way she did not fully model. "She's attempting to speak," Beck said. "Yuna, she's requested the floor." "Let her." Beck looked at her. "Let her speak," Amara said. "Whatever she says now, she's saying it after. That's all the difference." Yuna did speak. She stood at the microphone for 4 minutes and 40 seconds, and she said the things she had prepared. Amara's departure, the money, the history she had constructed. And the room listened, and the room heard it against what it had just heard. And the specific gravity of that sequencing was something Yuna had understood in the abstract, but had not been able to prevent. She was not incoherent. She was not hysterical. She was, as always, composed and precise and technically credible in isolation. But she was speaking into a room that had already heard Amara say, "I made a choice, and I have lived with it." And there was a quality to that admission, the directness of it, the lack of self-protection in it, that a person either had or did not have, and that a room could feel. Yuna's 4 minutes and 40 seconds passed. She walked off the stage. She did not look at Min-jae. She walked to the back of the hall, and she picked up her coat from the cloakroom and she left the building, and the 2 men who had been quietly stationed at each exit by Ryu, not to stop her. Min-jae had not needed to stop her. The stopping had happened at the microphone. Noted her departure and reported it. She was met on the steps outside by 2 officers from the Financial Crimes Unit who had been waiting with the patience of people who understood that their timing was, on this occasion, someone else's choreography. They were polite. She was, to the last, composed. She went with them. The aftermath was not clean. Nothing was. The next 6 weeks produced a quantity of legal and logistical complexity that Bayek managed with the focused efficiency of someone who had been waiting her whole career for a case with this many moving parts. The forged medical documents went to the relevant prosecutorial office. The financial records, the parallel payroll, the accounts Yuna had been running through the foundation's operational budget, went to the syndicate's internal board and then, because Min-jae insisted, to the appropriate external authorities as well. The board was not pleased. 2 members resigned. One issued a public statement that did not name Min-jae, but made its displeasure clear. Min-jae sat in the board meetings and absorbed the displeasure with the specific patience of a man who has decided that being liked by these particular people is not currently his priority, and then he went home. The press coverage was manageable. Not nothing. There were 3 days of significant noise, and Amara's name was in more places than she would have preferred, but manageable, which Bayek had said it would be, and which turned out to be accurate. Yuna's case moved through the legal system with the deliberate pace of these things. The charges were real, and the documentation was thorough, and Beck's office cooperated fully. It would take time. These things always took time. Lily did not understand any of it. That was both the simplest and the most complicated part. Lily stayed in the compound through November, in the room that had been hers, sleeping in her own bed with the worn rabbit on the pillow beside her. Min-jae maintained her routine with the methodical care of a man who had read enough about children and disruption to know that stability was not about grand gestures but about the small daily predictabilities. Breakfast at the same time, the same bath routine, the same books at night in the same order. Amara came to the compound most days. She had taken a room nearby. Not in the compound. That was too fast, too much. She had been clear about what she needed, and he had been clear about honoring it. A small rental in a neighborhood 15 minutes away. She came in the mornings, and she sat in the kitchen, and she drank the coffee that someone always made before she arrived. And she worked on her treatment schedule with the compliance of someone who had decided to take her own health seriously as an act of will rather than motivation, because motivation was unreliable and will was something she had more of. She and Joy settled in with the practical, unglamorous thoroughness of people who had been unsettled for a long time and were now very carefully building a new floor to stand on. Joy adapted. She adapted the way she had always adapted, with focus and with the particular social intelligence of a child who had spent her whole life reading rooms. She was enrolled in school in January. She made 2 friends by the end of the first week, which Amara learned because Joy reported it with the matter-of-fact brevity of someone filing a successful operational update. She and Lily developed a dynamic that was specific and strange and entirely their own. Lily was louder. Joy was more contained. Lily asked questions at a pace that occasionally required Joy to hold up a hand and say, "Wait, I'm thinking," which Lily accepted with the particular adaptability of a child who had learned, in the compound, that the people around her responded to directness. Mrs. O watched them together in the afternoons and said nothing, but the quality of nothing she said had warmth in it. Min-jae learned to be a father in the specific, imperfect way of someone who had no template for it, that he trusted. He did not do it dramatically. He did not do it perfectly. He sat with Joy at the kitchen table and helped her with math homework that he was genuinely not very good at, which she found alarming and then found funny. He took Lily to her pediatric appointments and sat in waiting rooms reading pamphlets about childhood development, with the focused attention of a man studying for an exam he could not afford to fail. He made mistakes, said the wrong thing, was too formal when she needed him to be loose, too loose when she needed a wall to push against. And he acknowledged the mistakes in the direct, uneditorialized way that Joy had apparently inherited from her mother, which she respected. Joy did not call him father for a long time. She did not call him anything, specifically, which was its own statement, and he did not push it, because pushing it would have been the wrong move, and he knew enough by now to recognize the wrong moves before he made them. She talked to him. She argued with him about whether the window needed to be open in the car, a debate she won through sheer persistence. She showed him her drawings without explaining them, which he understood was a form of trust, and he looked at them with actual attention rather than performed attention, which she noticed. The first time she called him Dad, it was an accident. February, a Tuesday. She was looking for something she had left in his office. A book, she thought it was in there. And she knocked and he said, "Come in." And she opened the door and said, "Dad, have you seen my—" and stopped. They both went still. She looked at him with an expression that was impossible to read, the specific look of a child who has just done something that surprised herself and has not yet decided how to feel about it. He did not make it significant. He did not do the thing she would have hated, which was to make his face soft and his voice careful in the way that adults did when they were overwhelmed by a moment. He just said, "On the left side of the desk, under the blue folder." She crossed the room. She found the book. She went back to the door. She paused. "Thanks," she said. "Sure," he said. She left. He sat alone in his office for a moment after the door closed, and he put both hands flat on the desk and looked at nothing in particular, and he let himself feel what was there, which was large and complicated, and also, underneath all of that, very simple. Then he picked up his work and continued. The conversation with Lily about her biological father happened in March. Min-jae had spoken with Baek and with a child psychologist recommended by the pediatrician, and the consensus was that it needed to happen before Lily was old enough to hear it from a source he could not control. The psychologist had given him language, not a script, but a framework. He had adapted it to himself, because the framework in its original form sounded like something he would never actually say. He sat with Lily in her room, on the floor, which she preferred to chairs in her own space. She had her rabbit. She was 5 years old, and she was looking at him with the open, trusting expression that she wore around him now, which had developed over the months since the Inchin building, since the drive home, since the accumulated evidence of daily presence. He told her that families were sometimes complicated, that sometimes the people who raised you and the people you came from were not exactly the same, that she had come into his life in a way that was different from what he had understood, and that this did not change anything about the fact that she was in his life and would stay in his life. He told her that her mother loved her. He said this because it was true. Complicated as Yuna was, whatever she had done, that part was true. He told her there was a man named Choi who was her biological father and who would, when Lily was old enough and wanted to, be someone she could know. Lily absorbed all of this with the particular seriousness of a 5-year-old processing information that she will not fully understand until she is much older, but is deciding right now whether it is safe. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "But you're still my dad." He looked at her. "I'm still your dad," he said. She put the rabbit in her lap and smoothed its ears, which was what she did when she was settling something internally. Then she looked up at him. "Can Joy be my sister?" He breathed. "You'd have to ask Joy that," he said. Lily considered this. "She'll say yes," she said, with the breezy confidence of someone who has already assessed the situation and reached a conclusion. "She taught me her handshake. That means we're all ready." He did not have a response for that. He just looked at his daughter, this child who was not his by blood and was entirely his by every other measure, and felt the weight of the last 6 months compress into a single, specific point of clarity. He had almost lost her to an airport. He had almost lost Joy to a clinic she should never have been brought to. He had almost lost Amara to a lie he had chosen to believe because the lie was easier than the alternative. Almost was the distance. Amara's treatment stabilized by spring. Not a dramatic reversal. Her body did not work that way. The condition did not work that way. Her doctor had been clear and she had listened, but stabilized. The slope she had been on for 2 years leveling out to something she could manage, something she could live around rather than toward. She told Min-jae on a Wednesday evening in April, standing in the compound's kitchen after dinner, the two of them alone for the first time in a while, because Joy had gone to watch something with Lily and Mrs. O had finished for the day. "My numbers are better," she said. "Not where they need to be eventually, but better." He was washing a dish. He set it down and turned around. "Better," he said. "Enough better that Dr. Shin said to stop thinking about it every day, which I'm working on." She leaned against the counter. "It's not a cure. I want to be clear about that. I'm going to be managing this for the rest of my life. Some periods will be harder than others. I know. I'm not telling you because I need something from you. I'm telling you because—" She paused. She looked at him. "Because I'm trying to stop managing everything alone. I'm trying. It doesn't come naturally." He looked at her. "No," he said. "It doesn't come naturally to me either." She made a small sound that was almost a laugh. "We're terrible at this." "Yes." "Both of us." "Yes." She looked at him across the kitchen. This man she had spent 6 years grieving and resenting and paying blood money for and loving in the buried, inaccessible way of someone who has locked something in a room they're afraid to open. She looked at him and she thought about the supply room and the false documents and the letter she had written and the years after, all of it, the full cost of it, the specific permanent shape of what had been lost. She thought, you cannot get that back. She thought, but here is what is here. Joy's voice came down the hallway, a laugh, high and surprised, the kind she made when Lily did something that caught her off guard. Lily's answering laugh came right behind it. The sounds moved through the compound's quiet corridors and arrived in the kitchen and were just there, present, easy in the way that children's voices in a house were easy when the children were okay. Amara turned back to him. "I'd like to have dinner," she said. "The 4 of us. Once a week. Something regular." She paused. "If that's something you want." He looked at her. "Yes. And I'd like—" She stopped. "I'd like to not be 15 minutes away." He was still. "Not here," she said. "Not the compound. I'm not ready for that, and I don't know if I will be. But closer. Something that's ours." She held his gaze. "Joy's and mine and yours. Not the syndicates, not the foundations. Just ours." He breathed. He said, "I'll find something." "I'll look too," she said. "I know you will." She pushed off the counter. She was going to go get Joy. She was going to take her home to the rental and give her a bath and sit on the floor of the small living room while Joy told her the plot of whatever she and Lily had been watching, which would be long and detailed and slightly inaccurate in the ways that Joy was always slightly inaccurate when she was excited. She reached the kitchen doorway. She stopped. She turned back. "Min-jae." He looked at her. She said, "The night I left. The letter I wrote." She paused. She had been carrying this specific sentence for 6 months, assembling and disassembling it, never finding the right version. "I need you to know that I believed I was saving you. I need you to know that I did not leave because I wanted to leave. She looked at him steadily. I know that doesn't fix the 6 years. I know what Joy lost. I know what you lost. She paused. But I need you to know that. He was quiet for a moment. He said, I believed you wanted to go. I told myself you wanted to go. I had a letter in front of me, and I used it to stop looking for another explanation. He held her gaze. I need you to know that too. She nodded. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She walked down the hallway and she found Joy in Lily's room, both of them on the floor with something spread between them. A drawing Joy had made, apparently being used as a map for some game they had invented. And she stood in the doorway for a moment before Joy looked up. Ready? Amara said. Joy looked at the map. She looked at Lily. She looked at Amara. She appeared to be calculating the cost of leaving now versus the cost of her mother's waiting face, which was the particular expression Amara wore when the answer was yes, we are going now. Can we come back tomorrow? Joy asked. Yes, Amara said. Joy nodded. She stood up with the specific resignation of someone accepting an outcome while already thinking about the next move. She collected her jacket and her backpack. She looked at Lily. Keep the map. We'll finish tomorrow. Lily held the drawing against her chest. Okay. Joy went to the door. She stopped and she and Lily performed the handshake, the one Joy had invented, the one with the 3 parts that had names Amara had never been told. And then Joy came out into the hallway and fell into step beside her mother, and they walked together toward the compound's front entrance. Mrs. O was at the end of the hallway with Amara's coat, which she handed over without comment. Min-jae was in the entrance hall. He looked at Joy. Joy looked at him. She held up her hand. He looked at it, at the specific configuration of the handshake, and he was going to say something like, I don't know how to do that. And she knew it, so she showed him, slowly, 1 part at a time. He got it wrong twice, and she corrected him without making it a big thing, which was exactly right. They did it properly on the 3rd try. Joy nodded with the satisfaction of someone who has transmitted a skill successfully. She went out the front door. Amara looked at Min-jae. He looked at her. There was nothing that needed to be said right now, and they both knew it, and neither of them said anything. She followed Joy out. The spring in Seoul that year was specific in the way that springs after hard winters are. Not beautiful in a soft sense, but in the sense of something that has been through something and is still here, still doing the unremarkable, persistent work of continuing. The apartment Amara found in May was in a neighborhood near the Han River, not far from the compound, in a building with a courtyard that had a tree she liked without being able to say exactly why. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that got morning light, a bathroom where Joy had already claimed the hook behind the door for her jacket. It was the first home Amara had chosen rather than arrived at. She painted the living room a color she and Joy picked together from a paint chip she had pulled off the wall of a hardware store during a rainy Saturday. Joy called it the color of ocean in the morning, which was not the name on the paint chip, but was better. Min-jae helped move the boxes on a Saturday in early June. He did not bring anyone else, just Ryu, who drove the truck and lifted things, and said almost nothing, which was Ryu's natural register. Min-jae carried boxes and assembled a bookshelf badly, and let Amara correct him and did not make it into anything except a bookshelf being assembled. Joy directed the arrangement of her room with the focused authority of a small general and did not ask for help until the desk was in a position she realized would block the light, at which point she said, Dad, can you move this? And the word arrived in the room, and both adults heard it, and neither one made it into a moment, because it was not a moment, it was just Tuesday. The bookshelf was lopsided. Amara said, It's going to fall. Min-jae said, It's not going to fall. She looked at it. He looked at it. She handed him the tools she had been holding. He fixed the bookshelf. Outside, the Han River went about its business. Gray-green in the June light, wide and indifferent and permanent. And the city went about its business around it. And in the apartment on the 3rd floor, the boxes were slowly becoming rooms, and the rooms were slowly becoming a place. And the place was slowly becoming the thing that people mean when they say home without thinking about what the word actually requires. Joy ate her dinner that evening sitting on the floor because there was no table yet, using a box as a surface. And she told Amara and Min-jae in exhaustive detail about the game she and Lily had developed using the map, which had expanded, apparently, into a territory that now included 3 kingdoms and a maritime dispute. Min-jae listened to the maritime dispute with the seriousness it deserved. After dinner, he said goodnight, and Joy said goodnight and showed him the newest part of the handshake, which had been extended again, and he got it right on the first try this time. He said goodnight to Amara at the door. She said goodnight. He went down the stairs. She stood at the door until she heard the sound of the outer entrance close, and then she stood there a moment longer in the quiet of the hallway, in her home, in the space she had chosen, and she breathed. Not the managed breathing of someone holding something back, just breathing. She went inside. She closed the door. Joy was in her room, talking to Lily on the phone about the maritime dispute. Amara walked down the hallway, and she stopped at Joy's door and she looked at her daughter. This person she had made and raised and carried and nearly lost, lying on her stomach on the bed with the rabbit backpack hanging on the hook above her head, and the necklace on the small dish on her dresser where she had put it for safekeeping, the gold chain catching the lamplight. Joy looked up and caught her mother looking. "What?" Joy said. "Nothing," Amara said. Joy squinted at her with the skepticism of a 6-year-old who has been read by this face for her entire life. "You have your face on. I have a lot of faces. The one where you're thinking something and you don't say it." Amara leaned against the doorframe. She said, "I'm just glad you're here." Joy looked at her for a moment, then she turned back to the phone. "My mom's being weird," she told Lily. Lily's voice came through, small and tinny. "My dad does that too." Joy said, "Adults are like that." Lily agreed that adults were like that. Amara pushed off the doorframe. She walked to the kitchen. She put water on for tea. She stood at the window and looked at the courtyard below, at the tree she had liked without being able to explain why, its leaves new and green in the June dark. She thought about the clinic hallway and the supply room and the letter and the years of blood draws and the compound and the Mapo clinic and the gala and the speech and all the other specific, unremarkable moments that had made the shape of the last 6 years. She thought about how none of it was over. Not really. The legal case would continue. The medical management would continue. The slow and imperfect work of building something new, from the material of people who had been broken and rebuilt, and were still figuring out what the rebuilt version looked like. She thought about how that was fine. The water began to heat. The tree moved slightly in the wind below. Down the hall, Joy laughed at something Lily said. Amara poured her tea. She sat down at the kitchen table, the one they had moved in this morning, the one that was slightly too big for the kitchen, but that Joy had insisted on because there needed to be room for people. And she held the mug in both hands and let the warmth come through the ceramic into her palms. She was here. Joy was here. The rest was work. The rest was the ordinary, persistent, unglamorous work of people choosing, day after day, to be honest and present and accountable to each other in the small ways that added up to something that lasted. She was not afraid of work. She never had been. She drank her tea.